My name is Kycell, and this is Chapter 9 of the Forgotten Minotaur King. The rotund and towering ogre that had just killed my newest friend and traveling companion Dar scratched his lumpy, hairless head, then gave a wide and barely toothed smile to the orc that had searched for me in the Placid Penguin Tavern all those months ago. At the sight of them, Ahani and myself scuttled further into the brush, away from the large host of mounted ogres that followed closely behind the emerald-skinned bruiser. A sudden hand on my shoulder nearly caused me to yelp and give away our position, only for me to turn and see it was Tristophe Myrink, who had narrowly escaped discovery by the initial ogre, as well as escape impalement on the tusk of his Catoblepas steed. Unfortunately, our retreat from the clearing had also lost us the ability to hear their discussion, and given the last thing I heard from the orc was him mentioning the destruction of the former Mintus Castle, which I was determined to halt, and something about the imminent return of a Minotaur, I knew I had to get more information. Soon, we heard the familiar thunderous sounds of Catoblepas' hooves rise and then lower, meaning the herd and the dozens of towering brutes riding them were departing. I turned to Tristophe, only to see her sadly eyeing the discarded remains of our companion Dar. It was his sacrifice that allowed her to live. As difficult as I knew it was, I had no choice but to tell her and Ahani that we needed to follow that deadly, unnerving group. I expected shock and dissension from the two young women I owed my own life to, but Ahani diligently continued dictating my speech, only offering a slightly disapproving headshake as she wrote, while Myrink used the grip of her gun still tightly clutched in her hand to wipe her eyes and give me a frighteningly vengeful look as she nodded in agreement. The path of the tumultuous ogres, who I believed to be a demolition team of a sort, given the orc's words, was incredibly simple to track. They left upturned trees and smashed fauna for yards and yards of the forest. The muddy woodland floor that had given our footwear trouble previously was pounded into a tough, solid, clay-like pathway, and we finally solved the mystery of the leaping leeches from earlier in the day, as their rolled and squeezed corpses lined the sides of the path. Their fluorescent red viscera must have been what gave the Catoblepas their striking magenta fur dye. While I pondered what purpose the coloring served, Ahani pointed out we had come to the end of the forest. As I looked out before me, I could see the herd a mile or so ahead of us, sloping into a crossroad in the center of a valley. Tristophe put her hand to my chest, halting me in place, as the ogres and the orc stopped as well for a few moments before taking the path on the left, which led to a hill, up which I could see the cresting tower of a very old and moss-covered minaret. This had to be the castle. My heart began to skip every other beat. I had finally made it. The Mintus Castle, the seat of the Minotaur King. It was right before my eyes. This elation was accompanied with the shooting pain of knowing the brutish horde we had followed were imminent in its destruction. I hiked up my scholar robes and tightened my bag of scrolls around my arm, then gave Myring a not-too-confident look of attempted determination, only for her to shake her head and point her thumb to the end of the right path at the crossroads. A little over a mile away, I could see the valley continued on the right, ending in a medium-sized cobblestone-built town, surrounded on all sides by enormous fields of golden yellow flowers. Before storming any castles, she wanted first to go to Goldenrod. I couldn't believe it. I was at the most crucial crossroads in my entire life, both literally and figuratively. Ahani, Tristafe, and myself followed the Katoblapos tracks into the valley and stood at the fork in the road where these important paths met. What we hadn't seen from the forest exit was a small sign just off the path. It further clarified to the left was indeed the Mendes Castle, and to the right was the Kingdom of Goldenrod. But there was a third path further up the center of the road, the Royal Regelasad Port. This sent a recollection through my mind. At the start of my journey, Professor Kornblau had said Krunturg's assassination of the Mendes house had angered the adjacent province belonging to the Regelasad. I then further recalled that Myring herself was born in that province. I turned to her with a look of shock. She looked back at me with confusion, but eventually understanding dawned on her, and she closed her eyes.
Yes, the Regelasad port city of Scalamandre is where my family was from, but as I told you months ago, I was less than a baby when we left. I see the Rakshasi Catfolk have even abandoned its name to further their empire's glory.
I then asked if that was why she suddenly hesitated going to the Mendes Castle. She gave me a look that conveyed what I said was truly idiotic.
No, of course not. I'm tired, sick, and hungry. We just saw the forces we're up against for your little book, and I don't know about you, but me and Ahani need rest, and you need more information. So, to the town we go, we?
Once again, yanked from my goal, as well as likely certain death, I conceded Myring was very much correct, and as the idea of rest entered my mind, the full level of exhaustion my determination had put from my mind until this point finally hit me, and I could barely stand. We would enter Goldenrod, try to find information, as well as prepare for whatever we faced at the Mendes Castle. The mile hike we had into town gave me time to think, not only about how we would find a place to rest while having no money, but about the information Dr. Kornblau had offered all those months ago during my journey. The only source of information she had was from the town of Goldenrod, the letters from the former Mendes guard. He must still live in this town. If I was unable to reach the castle at this time, a person that had worked there for years was a far more than welcome alternative. As we entered the town, the scent of the large yellow flowers that wreathed the kingdom was overpowering, and the brick architecture was impressive. It seemed far more sturdy than Wolfkeep's infrastructure. The people that walked the streets were a large majority tan-skinned humans, with the occasional pitch-stone-hued dwarves. A race I hadn't seen before. Myrink led the way, with her head on constant swivel for attack or a proper tavern and inn to suit our purpose. Her searching was met with success when she spotted a sign labeled Goldenerod's Public House. The lack of a punny name or alliterative title lent the place a far more safe and high-class establishment than the previous housings our group had suffered through. As we entered, we were greeted by a stern, elderly human man with a close-shaven head and sharply waxed mustache. Tristophe approached the counter and produced a coin purse neither Ahani or myself had seen prior to this point. Later, she told us she had pickpocketed it from a passerby.
We are in need of a room. 2, maybe 3 bedrolls should do.
She then gave Ahani and myself a theatrical wink, likely to give the proprietor the impression we were some sort of eccentric, out-of-town couple up to something illicit. However, the older man remained nonplussed.
That'll be 30 silver. Now, you'll need to clean up after yourselves, 'cause most of the cleaning staff up and took up jobs at the castle.
He slid Myrink a single key and pointed to the room in the rear of the public house. But I had to ask what he meant by job at the castle, as I was under the impression it was to be demolished on Rajal Assad orders.
Yeah, they had the town crier shouting about it about a week or so ago. They're planning to tear down most of the castle, but the demolition team was held up.
That explained the ogres in the forest, but this business with new jobs still didn't add up, so I asked him to continue.
Well, in that delayed time, some Rajal Assad princess and her fiancé had decided to follow up the pending demolition with a remodeling and bringing Goldenerod properly back into the Rajal Assad Empire once again.
While not entirely sure how this would impact my plans, I did find it fascinating. I began to ponder if this had anything to do with the orc from Wolfkeep when it all dawned on me. Prince Dinge, the horrifically violent Samazatory frogman that had been looking for me in the terminals months ago, and his Rakshasi fiancé, Wallabunga Rajal Assad. They must be the ones behind this all. And was it all to bring Goldenerod back into the Empire? Just as their pending marriage would potentially do to my home kingdom of Wolfkeep.
I tell you, having Rakshasa in charge again could be good for a change. Back when I was a kid, the fellow ruling did a good job cleaning up after the last guy's mess. But don't let old Kind in the back hear me saying that.
In a likely overly enthusiastic way, I leaped to the innkeeper's desk. Did he mean Krunturg? Was he here when Krunturg ruled? I passionately inquired. He gave me a fearful look, and with his finger to his mouth, he whispered,
Keep it down. If he hears you, he'll call us all sorts of hell.
But the terrified glance he gave past my shoulder told me it was too late. The wooden floors of the public house strained and creaked painfully as heavy cloven hooves, suited in caiman-skinned boots, treaded across the lodge. Exiting the room just next to ours was a burly, bipedal bovine form, standing at least 8 feet tall, with brown and white spotted hide and black-tipped horns that extended from the crown of his head nearly a meter long. In a thunderous voice that paralyzed our entire group, he said,
Now, who's out here asking about my old amigo, Krunturg?
Hi, my name is Matthew Lewis, and I do the voice of Kycell Bakshi, along with all the additional voices in The Forgotten Minotaur King. I hope you enjoy the podcast and continue to listen into the future. If you want to support my content, please donate to my Patreon, Matthew Lewis Podcasts. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Matthew Lewis Podcasts, all one word. Follow me on Twitter at Matthew Lewis P. Or leave a positive maximum star review on your podcast app of choice. If you found this podcast, I assume you're familiar enough with the genre to know how important reviews are to the survival of a channel. And I hope you recommend this to your friends. Or if you didn't like it, you could recommend it to your enemies, and I'll teach them a lesson. Keep it sleazy, folks, and thank you.